I think we are live, so fantastic. Oh boy, what a tiring day it has been. I don't know about you, where you took your test, but I took it in Mumbai and had TCS Ion Powai as my center, and a rather terrible experience there. The test started extremely late. I'm not sure about other centers if people had similar experience, but it was really exhausting to sort of just sit at one place and not do anything for almost 2 hours, right? Because see, when you reach the center, it was supposed to be 9 to 11:15. Uh, Pretty much everybody in my lab was there by around 8:30, and from there on, the test hadn't started till 10:30. So I think it started somewhere around 10:40. I don't remember the exact time, somewhere around 10:40, 10:45-ish. And from there on, it continued. But at least for sure, till 10:30, the test had not started. And we're just sitting in the lab. Got to meet a lot of IMS students, so that was one nice thing that came out of it. But otherwise, it was like a extremely terrible experience. Was it late for everybody? Because I can see some of you are saying happened to me as well. So I don't know whether it was like a TCS center specific thing or at other centers also they had similar experience. But it's extremely unfortunate towards candidates is what I feel. Because see, for me it doesn't matter. I'm taking it for analysis. But for students it is extremely unfair because you're not in the right mindset when something like this happens, right? You tend to get fatigued, you're exhausted, and 2 hour delay is just beyond anybody's. I mean, it's not even I don't know how to put it, right? It's just unfair is what I feel. So yeah, but I hope people sort of even push through that, continue to maintain their focus and were able to then appear for the MICAT. The Once it started, the conduct was fine, so there was no issue that I faced during the test. But of course, the delay was really painful, right? So a lot of you I can see in the chat window, people are saying in Noida and Gurgaon also same thing happened, and same in Pune as well, right? So I think and then it has happened basically everywhere. So let's talk about the test now. Now, with respect to test, again, I didn't find it any different from what it was last year. So very similar to MICAT 23 in that sense, whether it is psychometric test, descriptive test, and the remaining aptitude part of it, which is section C. Very similar in terms of the overall difficulty of the test. So no major surprises as such. There was only one question type which I felt that it's something that we have not seen a lot in MICAT. And definitely it wasn't there last year. So this was like I wouldn't call it a new question type in divergent thinking, but the way it is presented, it may appear to be like a new format to a lot of people, right? Some of you have asked, will we get refund, etc.? Absolutely, there's no refund. There's no question of that because the test has happened and you have completed the test, right? So you're not going to get any refund, etc. Though the overall experience wasn't pleasant, there's nothing that can be done about it. Okay. Anyway, so let's talk about let's keep that aside and talk about the difficulty of this entire thing, right? So now with respect to good attempts, right? See, again, when we say good attempts, everybody will have different accuracy level, right? And in some cases, somebody may find one section to be easier because they like it. The other person will find the same section to be slightly more difficult. So overall, I would say in divergent convergent thinking, for a decently prepared candidate, attempting around 10 to 12 questions was possible. And that is like a peak attempt that I'm keeping, right? So somebody who is good at it would be attempting, say, 10 to 12 questions. There will, of course, be people who will go more than that. Last year, if I recall correctly, in divergent convergent thinking, the topper was somewhere around 15 point something, right? So considering that, I don't see a lot of people anyway going beyond 15 attempts in divergent convergent thinking. 10 to 12 attempts is a pretty solid attempt in this particular thing. And again, standalone is what I'm talking about because when you add up all the other sections, overall attempt is what ultimately matters. So last year, just to give some numbers, right? Divergent convergent thinking, the highest score in MICAT 1 was 15.75. So assume something like a 16 correct, 1 wrong kind of a scenario. 15.75 was the highest in divergent convergent thinking last year. So this year also 10 to 12, you could have identified 10, 12 doable questions and done them. When it comes to verbal ability, last year the highest score was 13.75. Again, assume something like a 14 attempt, 1 wrong kind of a scenario, correct? So 13.75 was highest last year. This year also the difficulty was very similar. So I would say 8 to 10 attempts if somebody has done, whether you do it with RC, without RC, whatever, doesn't matter. As long as you have attempted a nice 8, 12, 10 questions with decent accuracy, I think you should be fine. When it comes to quant section, see, last year, 8.75 was the highest in quant. So it tells you a lot about the difficulty of the section. So this year, again, though it was possible for a very, very good candidate to do 7 to 8 questions, for most of the candidates, I would keep that number at somewhere around 4 to 5 questions or maybe 6 questions at the most. So doing anything beyond 5 questions would have been very, very difficult for a lot of people. And when it comes to the last thing, which is general awareness, for general awareness, I think 5, 6 questions out of 10 could have been done. Last year in GK, in MICAT 1, the highest was 9 marks. So there are people who are very, very good at GK and who will do, let's say, 8 questions or 9 questions correct. But for most people, I think 4 to 5 attempts or 6 attempts is okay as a decent attempt, I would say. So it will be great if people can just comment with their attempts so that even I get to understand how people have done. So let me just have a quick look at the chat window once to see what kind of attempts we have from student side. But overall, I think these are the numbers if you have hit. I think that's a reasonable attempt in each of those sections standalone. Okay. Now, let's talk about the individual sections a little bit for those of you who will also be planning to take the MICAT 2, or those of you who didn't take it today and are preparing for MICAT 2, there will be some takeaways from this session. So let's start firstly with the psychometric test. It's the initial 30 minutes that you spend, and you are supposed to attempt all the questions, right? So it is used as a qualifying thing in nature. There are no right or wrong answers when it comes to psychometric test. So you have to just complete it. Most of the students, I believe, would be easily able to complete it because assuming you have 30 minutes to do it, 150 questions is what you have. So at whatever pace you go, you should still be able to finish it. So the core here is to complete this, answer all the questions. Some of it is true and false, some of it is a Likert scale, right? So totally agree, totally disagree to totally agree kind of a thing. Then you have the section B, which is descriptive writing. Again, there is no negative marks. We'll talk about it a little more in depth. And then the final section, which is 70 questions is what you have and 80 minutes is what you get, right? The aptitude part of it. So very similar to last year, as I mentioned. And I would say an overall score of somewhere in the range of 15 to 25. Now, you may be thinking that's a very broad range. So why am I making that statement? See, it depends on what is your CAT or ZAT score also, because it's a combination of two. So if you have a high CAT score, let's say you have a 95 plus on the CAT, then even if you're in the 15 to 20 zone when it comes to MICAT, it should be fine for you, right? Or even I would say if you're slightly lower than 15, because last year we have had cases where people have got higher scores on the CAT, slightly low on the MICAT in the range of 12, 13, 14 as well, who have got calls, right? So that is why if you are, let's say, a 95 plus on the CAT or ZAT, with a 10 to 15 also in MICAT can be enough. If you're somebody with something like a 90 to 95 on the CAT, then you would need somewhere in the range of 15 to 20. But if you're somebody who is between 80 to 90 percentile on the CAT, you will be needing more than 20. I would say in some cases closer to even 25. Okay, so that is how you have to look at this whole thing. It's a combination of your CAT or ZAT score and then the MICAT score. So that is why there is no standalone cutoff for MICAT. So there's no way to say, okay, you get 15 marks in MICAT, you will sure shot get a call. You will also have to add that information as to what is your CAT or ZAT score for anybody to comment on it. But just to give you some data points, we had enough cases last year wherein people were in that range, which is 15 to 25, and on the CAT they had between 85 to 95, and people had calls, right? So if somebody is expecting 80, 85 plus on the CAT, you would need slightly higher on MICAT to basically cover it up. Okay, so that is how you have to look at this whole thing. Now I can see in the chat window, some of you have said 26 attempts, 20 attempts, 29 attempts, 20 attempts, and so on. Some of you even have higher. I can see somebody with 33 attempts. So those are some good attempts that you have put in, right? Especially I think your VA 15 is a very solid attempt. Aditya 25, Divanshi 27. So I think these are good attempts that you have. Expected score, if it is more than 15, I think you have done a reasonably good job today, right? And coupled with your CAT score, you can expect a call. Now let's talk about psychometric. So 30 minutes, 150 questions. Right? Now you had close to about 120 odd questions, which are on a scale. and about 30 odd questions which are true false questions. Now, a lot of these questions, you will see that after a point of time, the wording sort of becomes similar, right? So I am somebody who always voices my opinion when I'm in group, right? Or things like a lot of questions on collaboration, right? So I allow my team members to share their views and ideas, no matter how random they feel. And then the rewording of the same statement in some other form is what you will see after a couple of questions, right? So psychometric was fairly straightforward. Again, nothing much to talk about. You just keep answering questions one after the other. Okay. Then you move on to the next section, which is descriptive test. And here you had 25 minutes. Now, at my center, at least, they mentioned that you're not supposed to touch because the keyboard is a full-size keyboard, wherein you have the numpad on the right-hand side. They had mentioned that you're not supposed to touch that numpad while you are typing. Okay, otherwise it will log the test. But you can use the rest of the keyboard. They had removed some of the keys. So on the keyboard that I had, and I saw for a few others as well, the control key from both the left-hand side and the right-hand side, they were removed. Even I think Alt key was removed. On my keyboard, Alt key was also not there. So on some other, there was, I think Alt was there, but Control was not there and so on. So on a lot of keyboards, I saw that they had removed those keys. But anyway, you don't need it for writing this. Okay, so you just need the letters and that's enough. Okay, now let's talk about the topic. So for the first three questions, it is connected by a theme. The theme for this MICAT 1 was there is merit in hierarchy. So you have to write for the topic, against the topic, and three ways in which young managers can promote hierarchy in their organizations to make it more efficient. Okay. So now here again, topic wasn't very difficult. The word wasn't very difficult. I think hierarchy is a very simple word because in the past they have used difficult words. Last year, for example, there was this thing egalitarian, right? And a lot of people don't know what that word means. So at least here people knew kind of this thing that, okay, hierarchy, right? So somebody has mentioned, followed the steeple framework and Pixar pitch that was mentioned on the Zoom call that day. So great. So for IMS students, we've done a session on psychometric and descriptive writing, wherein we had discussed some frameworks. Those of your IMS students can access it in your MyMS dashboard. Okay. For this, again, you have to write 3 points for the argument and then for and against. Not very, very difficult topic. So I think, I don't know what you guys wrote about, but I wrote about things like there is hierarchy, so there is structure. And from childhood, we have sort of been trained to sort of respect that. There is unity of command. So, okay, one person is supposed to report to some other person, then that person reports to some other person, and so on. But when it comes to disadvantages, maybe some people may find it very restrictive. So let's say to get one signature, they may have to, let's say, go to 5 people, their manager, their manager's manager, and so on and so forth. So that's not really the best thing to do when it comes to ease of doing business and things like that. Okay. So that's what I wrote about. And then how young managers can promote hierarchy. So we spoke about creating some sort of reward mechanism for people who come up with creative ideas in spite of respecting the hierarchical structure that exists, right? So I spoke about some of those things, and yeah, that's about it. So my suggestion is to spend about 3 to 4 minutes on question 1 and 2, then about 4 to 5 minutes on question 3. Now, if you do this, you will have roughly about 12 to 15 minutes also for the third thing, or the fourth thing rather, which is the picture story writing. Now, picture story writing, we had 4 images and everybody will get 4 images. The images which were given was, there was a set of luggages. So I think 3 or 4 luggages, blue color bags. Then a market was there. There was a man who was prominently visible, but behind that person, so I took that aspect of the image that behind that person, there was some stall selling the roadside food, as we call it. Then there was one image which looked like butter, but on that there was you can call it a bee, a honey bee or something like that, on that piece of butter. And then you have a camel, and the camel was metallic camel, so it was not like a camel. Okay, so these were the images. Now it's written that you're supposed to mention the sequence. Okay, now I can see in the chat window somebody has asked, what if I don't write the sequence of the pictures? I think it should still be fine. See, we don't know exactly how they evaluate it, but for everybody who is taking MICAT 2, my best recommendation is mention the sequence. Okay, now the images are lettered as A, B, C, D. So, for example, you can write that the sequence that I'm following is DBCA, right? Or DCBA, stuff like that. So that's the first line. Then you put an enter and then you start writing the story. So the story that I wrote about was again like a very basic story, not the most again creative version that I could have come up with. The story was childhood. We used to travel a lot, so packed my bags, went to Rajasthan, met a lot of camels, and then decided to go and try some outside food. And there was a bad experience that there was a bee in that butter, right? So not like the best thing, but in that whatever limited time that was there, I think I just wanted to write something, so I wrote it. For me, anyway, it doesn't matter, but I hope people came up with some interesting stories. I think I hope people benefited from that session that we had done and were able to write something nice in this whole thing. Okay. Forgot to write the sequence of the story. How many marks will be deducted? Kriti, Fioni, not very sure about this, but it's okay. I think that's fine if you're not mentioned it. But again, for people who are taking MICAT 2, please mention the sequence because it is clearly written in the instructions as well. As time ran out, the last question, does it auto save? I think it auto saves, so that should not be a problem. So even if you, I don't know whether you're writing and then, because at some regular intervals on server, your data is saved. So I don't think it should be a big issue as such. But Aryan, just to be safe, right, I would definitely appear for MICAT 2 as well. So because something like this has happened, so I'm not going to take that risk. And then the standard aptitude 20 questions in divergent, verbal, and quant, and then 10 questions of GK. Okay, now throughout this thing, you had questions which had 8 options, some questions with 5 options, and some questions with 4 options. And there are quite a few questions with 8 options, which is one of the most irritating parts of when it comes to MICAT. Okay. All right, now let's talk about divergent and convergent thinking. A lot of questions on word association. So part A, part B, you have 4 words in part A, 4 or 5 in part B. And then you have to figure out which of the word will fit into all the options that are given. And then there was one on truth teller liar kind of a thing but that question I felt a little bit ambiguous because of the nature in which it was framed, right? So truth teller liar, basically that was the question type that appeared, which is what we call binary logic. Other question types which are there, visual reasoning. There were 2 questions of visual reasoning, not very difficult as such. Data sufficiency, there were again quite a few questions as to which of the following 2 statements or whatever statements, if they're there, then you will be able to conclude something. So slightly intensive in terms of thought process. You have to really think it through. You have to make those cases and then work it out. And there were a lot of puzzles, especially puzzles on coding decoding. Coding decoding was extremely significant in this test. You have to know letter positions, so A1, B2, C3, D4, etc., to solve a lot of these questions. So the question type that I was referring to in the beginning, that it was slightly new question type, was wherein you have analogies, right? So the first part is blank. So the general structure of analogies, AS to B, similar to CS to D, correct? So A was not there and D was not there. B and C were there. So you have to identify from the options which one will be A and which one will be D. Right? So generally when you get analogy questions, it's A, B, C that is given and D is asked, or A, B, D is given and C is asked. But here it's AS to B relates to CS to D. B and C is given while A and D has been asked. So there were, I think, 2 or 3 questions like this. For people who had not seen similar questions, definitely they would have taken some time to get adjusted to it. Not very, very difficult. If you sit through, you would have got the answer. For example, there was one on, I think, in the same thing on number application. So you had difference of cubes. So if you do 11 cube minus 10 cube, you get 331, right? So that was the logic of that particular thing. But then for the options also, you have to work it out. So you have to work out, okay, 8 cube minus 5 cube or 8 cube minus 7 cube, what will be the difference for 5 options before you hit your answer, right? So slightly demanding in that sense, where you have to persist in your effort. Even same for letters, because when you have a structure like that, you can't establish a relationship very, very easily unless you use options to solve the question. So that is why lengthy in that sense, And I think if people again had attempted it, they would have benefited from it, because there were still some areas which were very painful to work with. There were some questions which were very, very lengthy. And for one question, putting so much effort may not really make sense. Okay. Now, what's a good attempt? As I said, 10 to 12 attempts with 90% accuracy is good. If you have attempted, let's say, fewer questions, let's say 7 or 8 questions as well, but you're 100% sure that they're correct, it is still fine to have that sort of an attempt. Okay. All right, let's move on. The next is verbal ability section. Now, in VRC, there was one RC on homophilia and acrophilia on social media, roughly about 600 words. There are 5 questions on it. Medium difficulty. Personally, I didn't even look at the RC because I focused more on the other questions, because typically that is the approach that I've taken when it comes to MICAT, not to spend a lot on RC, because there are fill in the blank questions, there are synonym based questions and all of that. So for people who have good vocab, good knowledge of idioms and synonym antonyms, would have, and not even antonym, I would say, only synonyms, because most of the questions were related to that. So if you know your synonyms well and you know your idioms well, you would have been in a position to attempt those 4 to 5 questions which were there on this. Okay. So I think total 8 questions were there on this thing, fill in the blanks and choose the correct sentence, synonyms, etc. Out of 8, I think 4 to 5 questions for people with good vocab would have been possible. If you add the inference, para-completion, summary, para-jumble kind of questions to it, I think easily it was possible to attempt at least 8 questions in this section, even if you had decided not to attempt the entire RC, which is what even I had done, which is I'm not going to even read the RC because it's a lot of effort. So 8 to 10 attempts with 90% accuracy. Again, if you have fewer attempts, as long as you attempted with higher accuracy, you should be fine. So let's say 6 attempts, all correct, still a good attempt. Okay? Don't feel disappointed with that. Moving on to the next part, which is quant. And again, the most painful aspect of MICAT, I would say, because I don't even understand what's the rationale behind making such a difficult quant section. Honestly, it doesn't serve any purpose in my view, because what are you testing for? See, if you're testing the quantitative skills of people, give them problems that they're going to face later during their MBA program or later in their life, right? Which are relatable. What's the point of asking some really random mathematical questions? Okay. So a lot of questions, even when you look at arithmetic, right? They were not direct questions. You have to apply a lot of thought process to get to the answer. So there was one question wherein the number of girls is at least double the number of boys, and boys' average age is 21, girls is 23, and you're supposed to find the average of the class, right? You're supposed to put a commentary. That's a nice question because it demands your understanding of, okay, how averages work, the weighted averages work. You could have taken a case, okay, let girls be 2x, boys be x, girls be 3x, boys be x, and actually worked out, you would have got the answer. Not very difficult. But what is the point of asking some random question from coordinate geometry, right? That there is a point which is 4 comma minus 1, and then there is a, it's symmetrical about a line which is dividing the first quadrant in 2 equal parts. And then there is another line which is parallel to it. So you have to know that, okay, the slopes are the same. Then the equation of that line is given. And then you are supposed to find what is m square plus c square. So what's the point of asking this is what I don't understand. But anyway, whatever it is, we can't really complain. I think 5 to 6 questions is decent attempt with 90% accuracy. For people who have attempted, let's say 3 questions or 4 questions in quant, that's also okay. As long as in other sections, you have covered up for that. Okay. See, it's not possible to attempt equally in all the sections. You are supposed to concentrate on areas that you're good at and the areas that are easier in this particular test. So though I like quant, I'm generally good at quant. In MICAT, I don't spend too much time on quant because I know it is very difficult and there's no point getting into a lot of questions. In fact, if it's better to spend more energy on the LR section, on the deductive reasoning section and the verbal section, rather than spending a lot of time on quant. Now, of course, there were some questions which were extremely straightforward, but those are very, very few. I think apart from 2 or 3 questions, I don't remember a single question which can be classified as an easy question. Okay. There were some questions, for example, a plus b plus, what was it? A plus b plus c is given. Then I think a square plus b square plus c square is given. And 1 upon a plus 1 upon b plus 1 upon c is given, I think. And you're supposed to find, I think, something like a cube plus b cube plus c cube or something like that. Again, not very, very straightforward question, right? There was a question on two quadratic equations. And for people who are again watching this and will be watching this for MICAT too, just look at this question. There's a quadratic equation given. Say, again, I'm just putting it, ax square plus bx plus c, right? So you have two roots, a and b. Then you have some other quadratic equation, let's say x square b no kx square plus mx plus whatever n or something like that. Now you have two roots from the first equation, then you have two roots from the second equation. Now it is given that the reciprocals of those roots are in AP. So 1 upon a, 1 upon b, 1 upon c, 1 upon d, they are in arithmetic progression. Right? What is happening, right? And why is this question there? Why is such a difficult question there in MICAT, that, right? So since last year they have made it as difficult as quant of CAT. So last year CAT quant was very similar to MICAT quant. This year's CAT quant was easier than MICAT quant, and I'm pretty sure everybody who is attending this live will agree to that statement, that if you have taken CAT this year and you saw the quant section versus what you saw in MICAT today, MICAT was definitely more difficult and more irritating than what we had in CAT. Some of the questions, yes, nice questions. There was a question on smallest numbers, positive numbers with exactly 7 factors. Okay, so now you know that how to approach these kind of things, right? So you need to have a raise to 6, then it will become 7 factors. So you could have answered it. But how many people will have that sort of a comfort when it comes to numbers? Questions. There was some question on geometry which are very easy. So there was one which was, there's a rectangle, 2 is the length, 1 is the breadth, and there is a cow tied at the corner of 2, 1, and you're supposed to find what is the proportion of the area that it will graze, right? Very simple, very, very direct question, easy. There was another question which people who are good at geometry would have answered, that you have a square which is side 4, and then you take 4 points on each of the sides, you join them to get a, and then you have a regular hexagon, and then you're supposed to solve it. Now, if you apply the principles of trigonometry or 1s2, 1s2 root 2 kind of a thing also, you would have got the answer. There were 8 options to that. So you have to arrive at the final thing to even venture and say, okay, fine, this is possibly my answer. So slightly irritating for sure. I don't know how many people sort of answered it. Diagonal one was easy. Yeah, Krisha, as you mentioned, way too difficult and lengthy. Anmol, I agree. Number of diagonals question also. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't very, very difficult because again, if you factor in the number that was given, you would have been in a position to answer it. But again, you have to have your concepts in place to be in a position to answer those questions. Now, when it comes to GK, the last thing, good thing, there were some straightforward questions. Sale logo, for example, that was there. It was part of it was part of match the columns. But if you know that that logo is sale, you would have basically got the rest of it correct. So even if you had no idea about which other 3 logos were there. So that was one easy question. There was one on, something related to Coke tagline, right? So which of these 8 has never been used as a tagline by Coke? Now, there are 8 options, right? It's very difficult to answer such a question. So I would say most of the people would have skipped that sort of a thing, right? Then there was some question about Lewis Hamilton, I think. Yeah, Lewis Hamilton was the question, right? So brand ambassador of what? Yeah, so business GK, yes, because there were some questions on mergers and acquisition also, like Bharti, so Vodafone Idea, then Airtel has acquired something in Africa. Then there was one more. Then there was one on ownership. So which of the following is not owned by Reliance? So now people who have reasonably good awareness of business, they would have answered 5 to 6 questions easily. I think you could have answered 4 to 5 attempts, I think is fine, with maybe one wrong here and there. As long as you have like a positive score in GK, you should be fine. Okay. So that's about it for the analysis. Some of you have asked about cutoff. Yeah, as I mentioned towards the beginning, let's go back to that first slide that we had. So overall, MICAT 1 was very similar to MICAT 1 of last year. Cutoff, if you ask me, in combination with CAT is what you have to look at. There's no objective way of saying this is a good score. 15 to 25, that is the range that I'll put depending on your CAT score. For people who are expecting to get, let's say, 95 plus on the CAT, less than 15, higher than 10. So in the 10 to 15 range in MICAT 1 should still be fine to get a call. People who are in the 90 to 95 when it comes to CAT, and somewhere around 15 to 20 in MICAT 1 should have a shot. And people who are at, say, 85 to 90 will need about 20 to 25 in MICAT. And people who are between 80 to 85 on the CAT will need more than 25 also. Okay, that depends. So overall, 15 to 25 is what we can keep it at. Sectionals, there are no sectional cutoffs per se. They have never released that. But whatever we have heard is that you need to have a positive score in each of the sections. So you can keep like a bare minimum aim of getting at least 1 or 2 questions in the section correct, and then just focus on what you're good at. Right? So for example, the way I did the paper today, I started with GK as a section, attempted I think 6 or 7 questions there. From there on, moved to quant, did about 4 or 5 easy, moved to divergent conversion, again did about 5 to 6 easy questions, moved to verbal, did the same thing. So then if you do that, if you do, let's say, even 5 attempts in each of the sections, right, you have covered whatever sectional cutoff requirement they'll have. And it is, as far as I know, the sectional cutoff requirement would be something like 1 or 2 marks, not more than that, because we have seen people getting 2 marks and in a particular section and also getting calls. So that is why don't worry too much about sectionals, as long as you don't fall into the negative territory. So you should not get negative in a section, because then that will become a problem to get a call. Okay. So that's about it. Any questions, if you have, let me know. We can quickly discuss it. Otherwise, we are more or less done with the analysis, right? 2 questions related to Tata is what AB has mentioned. That's correct. So there was one which appeared as a true false, I think, and there was one which appeared as part of that merger acquisition thing, if I recall correctly. Okay, I've got slot 146. What percentile will this sum up to? Will this be enough for CAT? Okay, so you should be asking that if I get, let's say, certain percentile, and now you know predicted CAT percentile. Let's say if your predicted CAT percentile is 85 plus, you should be targeting at least 20 in MICAT 1. So that is how I will put it. I could answer only 2 questions in GK. That's fine. So if you've been able to answer 2 questions and both of them are correct, okay, or even if one is correct, one is wrong, and you have a positive score, as long as you're compensated for that through other sections and have done well there, overall score is what will matter for the final. Right? Prep for MICAT 2, what extra to do? So it hasn't changed much from MICAT 1 of last year. So whatever you have been doing so far is fine. Specifically, I would say focus on business GK, because they have started, unlike some of the previous years where they used to ask a lot of random history, geography. At least this year, they didn't do that. Lot of stuff related to brands, logos, taglines, and business context. So mergers, acquisitions, and things like that. So if I'm planning to take MICAT 2, I'll definitely focus on doing a lot of business GK. That would be number 1. Second, I'll not worry a lot about quant. I will ensure that I have a few solid topics, areas that I'm very good at, like say arithmetic, and it could be algebra, etc. I can of course practice those areas as well, that I'm not good at, but I cannot depend on quant. When it comes to verbal, my strategy would be to do a lot of idiom practice as well as vocab practice, and keep on practicing those summary, odd sentence, or parajumble kind of questions. I'll not focus a lot on RC, though it's always a good idea to do it, provided you have enough time for that. And then when it comes to divergent conversion, I'll definitely focus a lot on the alphanumeric series as well as coding decoding kind of questions, because they sort of dominated, right? There was a question on something related to simple interest, compound interest, and one of them had some weird compounding happening. So I didn't do it, but because I felt that either it was wrong or it was something that maybe I've never seen in the past. So I was like, okay, let it go. Yeah, so overall, I think quant was extremely bad. 5 attempts, I think, should be very, very good. Not even 7, 8 that I've written here. 7, 8 would be like for people who are doing very, very well on the quant in general. But for others, I'll put 5. So ideal would have been something like getting a 10 in divergent convergent, about 8 in verbal, about 4 or 5 in quant, and somewhere around 3 to 4 in GK. If you've got those scores, I think that's a fantastic score to get. Attempts should be slightly more than that, considering you'll get a few negatives, etc. Okay. Anyone knows the answer of cow grazing grass? I don't remember, but again, it was very easy, right? Because the area is simple. So 2 by 1. So that is the total area. And then it's 1/4 of the sector with radius 1 that the cow is grazing. Okay. Can you suggest any resources to practice these type of questions? Okay, so definitely ADMAT masterclasses. For those of your IMS students, have a look at ADMAT masterclasses, which contain a lot of questions on visual reasoning, coding, decoding, etc. So practice those questions, and mocks should definitely help. So take mocks. IMS mocks are slightly on the easier side when it comes to actual MICAT. So your scores will be higher. That's about it. But so I met a few students and they were saying, sir, MICAT mocks are easy of IMS. I said, how much did you score? And they said 20. I said, then it is not that easy. So even people who said they're easy were able to get up to 30, 35 marks out of 80. I would say if you're getting somewhere around 30s in IMS mocks, I think that's a very good position to be in, right? So aim for that in IMS mocks. In the actual test, you can aim for getting at least a 20. But having said that, with CAT score or ZAT score, even a 15 may suffice, even a 12 may suffice. We never know, but it depends a lot on your CAT score. Okay. All right. Cool. Again, Divyanshi, your feedback, right? So revise the IMS mocks. But see, the point is, we'll have a look at it and we'll see what can be done. Feedback is taken. I'm not saying no. But the point is that even then, if you're able to score on the higher side, it is preparing for you for this experience, right? It's not that, see, if the test is difficult, right? It's difficult for everybody. It's not that one person will find it easy, the other person will find it difficult, correct? So you will see that a lot of people get stuck in that range because everybody is universally finding it difficult. It's not that I have some significant advantage. I think I did what 8 or 9 questions in quant today because I don't want to waste my time on the other questions. It's not that I'll not be able to solve them. If I sit now, I think given the paper, I think I should be able to do 15, 16 also with no constraint of time or even more. But then during the test, it's a different thing. So that feedback is taken. We'll see what can be done if we can make any changes to the mocks that we have. But yeah, otherwise also I would say even if you take all the IMS mocks, that's more than enough practice that you need for MICAT. And additionally, if somebody is thinking of quant, definitely doing CAT masterclasses will also be useful. But I don't know if it is worth the effort, considering you can focus more on divergent convergent thinking and the verbal ability section to compensate for quant. See, last year, whatever scorecards we had gathered, we saw that everybody universally had a bad quant score. Because as I mentioned in the beginning, right, highest in quant was 8.75 last year out of 20. So you know that nobody's touching it because it's that bad. So even people who are good at quant will not do it. So your cutoffs are going to be obviously lower, right? So don't worry too much. 15 to 25, that's the range to target in my view for overall this. Okay. All right. Great. So I hope this has helped you. Wish all of you all the best. And for people who are taking MICAT 2, for people who had the MICAT 1, if you're very serious about MICAT, I would always suggest you to also go for MICAT 2 and see how things work out there. Okay. So yeah, wish all of you all the best and thanks for joining. I'll see you soon. We have Snap analysis coming up. So I'll see you in that. Okay. Bye, everyone. Take care.